Check, check.
You should be good to go.
All right. We'll start with the basics. What is your full name?
Joseph Ferdinand Rodrigues,
Okay. And when were you born?
October 27th, 1931,
Okay. Where were you born?
in the front bedroom of the house I was to live in.
Okay. And what town and state was that in? Because it was in America,
It
right?
was in a part of New York City. The county was Queens,
Okay.
which is where LaGuardia Field and JFK are now both in that county.
Mm-hmm.
And closer division would be Richmond Hill, Queens. So the area I grew up in was Richmond Hill, Queens, which was part of New York City.
Was it common then to be born at home? Was that the plan, or were you?
I don't know if it was common or not. The doctor that my mom had, he was, I don't know if he was born in Germany, but he had German background. And after he delivered me in the front bedroom, he asked my mom if he could be my grandfather. Or godfather,
Godfather,
not
okay.
grandfather. So she said, sure, you know. So he said, okay, now that you've agreed, he said, I have one request.
Mm-hmm.
I said, my father's name was Ferdinand, and I would like you to use Ferdinand for the baby's middle name.
Okay. So that's
So
where
that's
Ferdinand
where
came
Ferdinand came from.
So Ferdinand was your the doctor who helped your mom give birth to you. It was his father.
His father, yeah.
Okay.
And their last name was Philip.
Okay. Ferdinand Philip.
So he was Herman Philip. I don't know what his father's name was.
That was the doctor, Dr. Herman Philip. So that actually gets to the next question, which is, were you named after anyone? So we know your middle name came from the doctor who helped your mom. Was Joseph a family name, or were you named for anybody, or just
I have no idea.
just a name your parents liked, maybe? And obviously it's a biblical name, so it could have been that too. Speaking of your parents, what were their names? What was your father's name, and what was your mother's name? Both her maiden name, and then obviously when she met your
my dad's name was Severiano Rodrigues, and my mom's name was Florence, and I'm not too sure what her last name was. So she used to tell me that her last name was Batt, B-A-T-T.
That's what I remember being told. Yeah.
Now, they didn't have any records, or they didn't hardly have photographs. You know.
Mm-hmm.
They had a few photographs in albums, and they were all sepia color, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So that was, and they were both born in 1888.
Okay.
My mom being born in the island of Grenada,
Mm-hmm.
and my dad born on the island of Madeira, which was Portuguese. And Grenada was, I guess it was run by the British at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Because
And if-
whenever I would ask her, I said, what language did you speak, you know? Because my dad grew up speaking Portuguese. And she said, well, English, of course. She said, we were English subjects.
Okay. And Grenada, I think there's two Grenadas, aren't there? Which?
It's just north of South America.
Okay, she was the one off the coast of South America. And Madeira is near Portugal?
Yeah,
It's like an
off the
island
coast
off
of North Africa.
Okay.
but it's owned, I guess it
was-
still is,
It was Portuguese territory.
Portuguese, yeah.
Okay. So we've established where your parents were from and when they were born. Do you remember their exact birthdays, like month and date? Did they know their exact birthdays?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
They did. Because I know it wasn't that uncommon further back in history to maybe not necessarily know your exact birthday. Because, like you mentioned, the records weren't very
Yeah.
good. Do you know the story of how your parents met each other? Because they came from two different
Yeah,
places in the world.
When my dad became a teenager, he decided he was not going to live the rest of his life in Madeira. He was going to come to America and live as an American. So he traveled to, I think the first place he went was Brazil, which they spoke Portuguese.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently he was bilingual. He could, speak American or English and Portuguese. So he worked for a period of time in Brazil to get enough money to get up to Grenada. And that's where he met my mom. And as far as I know, they didn't get married. And I'm not sure how long he stayed in Grenada, but he stayed long enough to get enough money to get to New York. And there again, I'm not sure of the time frame, but when he got settled in New York, and I know he had a sponsor. The sponsor's name was Jules da Silva, and he was a crystal chandelier craftsman. And eventually he made a crystal chandelier for our home in Richmond Hill. Now I'm not sure where my parents got married, whether or not my father went back to Grenada,
Mm-hmm.
or he brought her to New York. But anyway, hopefully they got married someplace.
Yeah, well, seemingly. I want to ask two follow-up questions. The first is, do you know how your dad had a connection with Jules da Silva? Like, how did that relationship form, and how did he ask him to be a sponsor or anything like that?
Yeah. They must have been good friends, because in those days, if you agreed to be a sponsor, you agreed to take care of this person.
Right.
There was no welfare or,
Mm-hmm.
So whether or not they grew up together on Madeira, I don't know. My parents never formally sat me down and told me stories.
Right.
Most of it I would hear them when they had company,
Mm-hmm.
and the adults would all be talking,
Right.
and I could hear them.
Right.
So, and my dad wanted to be an American so bad that he gave up Portuguese. He
Mm-hmm.
stopped speaking it.
Mm-hmm.
And he got to the point where he would get mail from Madeira. He would take it to Jules in Brooklyn. Jules would read him the letter, and then my dad would dictate to Jules the answer. He couldn't speak or write Portuguese. He said, once I decided to be an American, that's all I'm going to be.
So when you say he couldn't write Portuguese, did you mean he didn't have the capability, or he chose not to? Did he used to be able to before he became a citizen?
I'm sure it started off as a choice. But then once he decided, I guess, the less you use something,
Mm-hmm.
the less you have of it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I don't know what, how many years it took him to completely forget it. But when I knew my dad, he would get the letter, he wouldn't even open it.
Mm-hmm.
And we would go to Brooklyn the next Sunday and see Jules, and that was it.
That was one of his errands that
So
he had to
they
run.
were good friends.
Sure. Do you know much about either of your parents' childhoods? Like, do you know, like, what type of schooling they had, or did they have schooling, or was it more they were raised at home and learned at home, or do you know anything about that?
No, they never really mentioned schooling, and but I would assume that, well, my mom apparently only spoke English, and I would assume that in the Portuguese schools they taught Portuguese and English,
Mm-hmm.
but that's just my assumption.
Could both your parents read and write
Mm-hmm.
pretty well?
Mm-hmm.
How old were you when your dad passed away?
14.
Okay. So you didn't have a lot of time to develop
No.
memories of him, and probably the relationship that would have come later in life, let's say, like you have with a lot of your kids. So this question is to describe your parents, maybe not just kind of what they looked like, but also what they were like.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously it was a different time, so I don't know what the parent-child relationship was like. You obviously mentioned that they didn't exactly sit you down and tell you stories. Maybe they spoke to you differently than they spoke to their friends, but were they stern? Were they friendly? Were they, what are your memories of them like with you and then with other people?
Of course, my dad was gone for probably close to 12 hours a day, just going back and forth to work. And he worked a half a day on Saturday. So he wasn't around that much. And the strange thing was, my dad I think he was 5'9" or something. Not tall, but not short either. And he was strong. And the one thing I remember about him that I still can't believe to this day is he had all his teeth pulled out in one day.
Wow.
Now,
Were you around when this happened, or was
yeah.
Okay.
I was young, but I remember him coming home and only having soup, and But I guess in those days they figure, as long as we're going to numb your jaw, and we'll pull them all out at once. And he survived that and had false teeth made. And but the night or morning that he died, he came home from work, and he had a pain in the back. So he sent me up to the corner drugstore to get a mustard plaster, which was, I don't know what the ingredients were, but it was something you could stick on a back pain, and it was supposed to relieve it. Well, somewhere during the middle of the night, he woke up, with severe chest pains, and my older brother, his wife was living with us. It was during World War II, and he was overseas someplace. And so I went and got the mustard plaster, and then during the night I could hear the noise going on in the next bedroom, because it was a 3-bedroom house. My parents had the front bedroom, I had the middle one, and my brother's wife was staying in the 3rd bedroom. and she had a car. So she went, and she didn't need a car for the doctor, but he died in the bed at home.
Mm.
And so then she had to go to the parish rectory because the priest didn't have a car.
Mm-hmm.
So she went and picked up the priest, and he came and gave the last rites.
Mm-hmm.
And I never saw my father dead.
Hmm.
I refused to see him that way,
Mm-hmm.
which I've never been sorry. To me, a dead person's a dead person. They're not the same.
Right, they're not there anymore.
So anyway, that was...
So what was he like when he was alive and when you were a kid? Like,
Well,
I know he wasn't around much, but
yeah.
do you have any memories of maybe
Well,
like Christmas or the holidays or any big
Yeah.
significant events in your childhood where he was there and what he was like?
Well, of course, he would set up the Christmas tree, and we would all put the ornaments on, and we had electric trains. And in those days, they used lead for snowflakes or icicles on a tree.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, when the lead would hit the railroad track, it would spark, and the lead would burn.
Mm-hmm.
So that was always a big treat to shake the tree and watch the sparks fly.
Sounds very safe.
Yeah. But he was real handy. He could do anything, make anything, fix anything. And so just to show you how, not crude, but how not too concerned about things, the house was built, had a basement, first floor and second floor. Second floor was the bathroom and the 3 bedrooms. And then the basement, all it had was wash sinks.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the washing machine was. But there at the end of the wash tubs was a toilet that my father had put in, and it was just a toilet sitting on a... So,
Right. No privacy.
so if you were downstairs and wanted to go, you could go,
Nice.
You had to walk up to the second floor.
I think
So-
somewhere there's
And
like a nickname for that kind of toilet, the Pittsburgh toilet.
Yeah.
That's funny.
And we had, my dad loved pigeons. He worked in Manhattan. Of course, I guess it's still overrun with pigeons.
What did he do for work?
He worked for a bank, and it was a big bank. I don't remember the name of it. I think it was Chase something. And he was the building superintendent. He was responsible for all the maintenance in the building, and except, I guess, for the elevator. And so he was they used to call him the super,
Mm-hmm.
building super. And so...
Explains that, you can't be a super unless you're pretty handy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, getting back to the pigeons, he brought pigeons home from the city. He'd catch them on the windowsills or whatever.
And he was bringing them to Brooklyn? Or Queens?
Queens.
Queens,
Yeah.
okay.
And he built the fanciest pigeon coop that ever was. He built it into the garage roof, so that the floor of the pigeon coop was like the ceiling of the garage. And it had a big runway where they could run around and fly and whatnot. And then the big thing with pigeons is you're supposed to fly them every day. So you'd let them all out, and they'd all, eventually wound up flying in a circle, and then they'd come one by one and come back and land and go back in the coop. Well, just before he died, of course the war was on, and I guess he figured we didn't have a car, but we had a garage. So he said, well, why don't we get some chickens, and we'll have eggs, and we'll have chicken, and, So that had just started, I think just a couple of months before he died. We had the chickens, but they were still young,
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I kept the chickens for years and years, and the pigeons, I finally got fed up with the pigeons because there were pigeon thieves that used to come at night. The pigeons would all be sleeping, and they'd come with a canvas bag and just throw them into them, take them away. Now, they had to get up on the garage roof.
Right, so they had to get onto your house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I forgot what I was going to say.
Well, you got tired of the pigeons because of the pigeon thieves.
Oh, yeah, because of the thievery, yeah. So, during the war, whatever few years were left with the war, I used to sell the eggs to the German delicatessen that was up the street from us.
Pigeon eggs?
No, the chicken eggs.
Okay.
Chicken eggs. And she would buy every egg I had for 50 cents a dozen.
Was that pretty good back then?
I guess, yeah, for fresh eggs, yeah. I'm not sure what regular store-bought eggs went for, but so then little by little, I had less and less time to take care of the chickens, and so eventually got rid of all of them. Oh,
And all the pigeons?
huh?
Did you get rid of the pigeons too?
Yeah. Oh, we ate most of them.
Ate the pigeons?
No, not the pigeons.
The chickens.
No, the pigeons we just turned
You
loose.
just turned them loose.
Yeah. And the chickens, I had one Rhode Island red hen that was a beautiful bird. And then there was another, I guess a rooster. I assume he was a Rhode Island red too. Anyway, I brought the hen and her eggs into the basement of the house and let her sit in the house and hatch the eggs. And so I think just two of them survived, and one was a rooster. Well, the one rooster, as soon as he got old enough, that's all he did was crow every morning,
Mm-hmm.
So somebody turned us in, and my mom and I had to go to court, make an appearance before the judge. And the judge said, you have what we in the legal field call a nuisance.
Mm.
He said, now you can solve the nuisance by keeping the rooster in a pen where he can't raise his head. Then he can't scream. Or you can have him for dinner. So my mom, she was the butcher. She said, oh, I can't see the poor bird being stooped over for the rest of his life. So we had him for dinner.
It was dinner instead. A quicker exit for the bird that way.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of dishes would you make with the chickens? Is it fried chicken or chicken pot pie?
Well, I never really did any cooking.
Mm-hmm.
My mom she was a good cook, and I never really paid attention to what she made. I just sat down and ate.
Mm-hmm.
You had no choice,
Mm-hmm.
You either ate that or you ate nothing,
Mm-hmm. I don't think I would have lasted very long in your time. So, your dad was he was a superintendent, and he was pretty handy. Did you have any knowledge of how he became handy? Like, was it something he actually studied, or was it just sort of
No,
life?
I just remember he had a shop in the basement, and the whole wall was just lined with tools, planes and saws and all kinds of hammers and so forth. And then he also had a workbench out in the garage where he had a grinder and a buffer wheel.
Mm-hmm.
So I would not really help him. He never really wanted help, and but he would let me watch him and so forth. So one of the things he did was be in a two-story house. The wash was in the basement, so the wives had to haul the wash up from the basement, which was soaking wet because they just had the wringer on the washing machine. There was no dryer.
Mm-hmm.
And so my dad, being my dad, he erected it must have been a 30-foot pole in the back. And the top of the pole had a cross piece and two pulleys that went to the back bedroom. So if it was a day where wash had built up and, raining or whatever, there were two more wash lines downstairs. So my mom had 4 wash lines that she could hang,
Mm-hmm.
but she had to go from the basement up to the second floor.
Mm-hmm.
So, oh, something that he did was, I still can't believe it. There was, the end of our street was commercial. There was a drugstore and a barber shop and so forth. And then there were 4 garages when I was growing up, and they were concrete block. And well, apparently the garages that were there before were wood. So when my dad found out that they were going to be tearing the whole garage down, and he just had room for one, he took the damn garage apart, carried it home, put it back together, and we didn't even have a car.
So now you had was this your family's first garage or your second garage?
The first garage.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was just
So he
room.
basically just moved it. He moved it from where it was to your guys' house.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
How long did it take to get a car to put in it?
Huh?
How long after that did you have a car to put in the garage?
Well, my parents never had a car.
Wow.
My father knew how to drive, but he never had a driver's license. And so I guess the first one to use the garage was my older brother, which is Diane Sametta's dad.
Mm-hmm. And that's Al?
Al, yeah. Al, and the second son is Kenneth,
Mm-hmm.
and then me. So as far as I know, there was at most, counting my cars, 3 or 4 cars that used that garage.
Mm-hmm.
And my father never had any of them.
None of them were his, yeah.
And we had a party driveway, if you could believe this. The land where the houses were built, and they were built before I was born, so they were built in the late 20s. They had underground power, underground sanitary sewers, underground storm sewers. What else? but they were like
That's pretty good. That's
up to
advanced
date for the late
that time.
20s,
Yeah.
you know. And they had, I think they called it BX wiring, but it was electric cable with a metal casing that was flexible.
Mm-hmm.
So all I did was nail the cabling to the 2x4 and then cut the end and expose the wires and use that for the connection. So even that was, you know, the latest thing.
Did you have a lot of electrical appliances in that house? Like,
No, we had
did you have light bulbs and?
yeah, we had light bulbs, we had a radio, or radios, and in fact, my brother Ken, he built a portable radio out of a kit, and the damn thing was that big, and it was half batteries. You could hardly carry the thing. It was so damn heavy.
Did Severiano have did he say it Severiano or Severiano? Do you remember?
I don't know.
Did he have a middle name?
I think it started with an A now. I don't know if it was Albert or somehow the name Arthanacious. Well, I don't know if that was him or somebody else.
And then shifting gears a little bit to your mom, did you know much about her youth, or did you hear many stories?
No.
She was around quite a bit longer than your dad, right?
Yeah.
So you probably got to know her better as you were an adult and stuff.
Yeah, they were both the same age, and my dad died at age 56, and my mom died at age 76.
Okay, so you had
So
20
she
more
lived
years with
20
her.
years. So for 20 years, it was just the two of us.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why when I met Grandma Sue, I said, look, if we get serious and we want to get married, I said, my mom is part of the deal.
Mm-hmm.
Because the two of us have been together for, I don't know, 10 years or whatever it was. So she said, oh, that's fine. Little did she realize it wasn't that fine, you know.
So she was born in Grenada and grew up in Grenada?
Mm-hmm.
And it was a British colony or territory. So she spoke English.
Yeah.
Do you know if she had formal schooling?
As far as I know, she did. But I couldn't tell you how, you know, if she went to 12th grade or
How
10th
far?
grade or,
Mhm.
I don't know.
Did she ever have, like, you know, I know it was a different time. Did she ever have a job? Did she ever have a hobby or like a trade or anything that she took a particular interest in?
I vaguely remember her having some kind of World War II job, but it was just like part-time.
Mm-hmm.
And it was something like maybe putting uniform materials in a box, you know, boxes.
Mm-hmm.
Because in those days, women didn't drive cars.
Mm-hmm.
Most of them didn't smoke,
Mm-hmm.
and most of them were homemakers. You know,
Right.
they had kids, and they took care of the kids.
What do you remember about her personally? I would imagine you spent a lot more time with her than you did with your dad. Was she fun to be around? Was she stern? Probably both.
No, she was fairly easygoing. Of course, that depended on what I did, you know.
Sure, yeah, of course.
But overall, she was I think she probably felt more sorry for me than she did for herself, you know,
Mm-hmm.
losing my father so young. But overall, I would say she was easygoing.
Right.
And in New York City, I don't know if it's still that way today, but you can't drive until you're 18.
Hmm.
So, and both my brothers were gone, so I had no car to learn on. So I went to one of these driving schools, and a couple of months before I was due to turn 18, and I told the instructor, I said, look, I realize you have, I think it was 3 hours of driving and 2 hours or something of class. I said, I don't want the class. I said, I have the book memorized for the last 2 years, you know. So he said, fine. So when it came time to take the test, of course they had dual controls, you know, so you couldn't screw up too much. But it was right out in traffic with trolley cars, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and I passed.
That's good. What did your mom do? Like, what was a typical day in your mom's life when you were a kid? Did she pretty much stay at home? Would she have to go out to the store? Or?
Yeah, she would, I think, pretty much go out daily. Because for one thing, we had an ice box,
Mm-hmm.
not a refrigerator.
Right.
And my dad, being ingenious, ice boxes were a pain in the neck because they always had a bucket of water under them, you know, especially during the summer. So what he did was he drilled a hole in the floor and put like a catchment cup under the ice box and just ran a line down to the wash tub in the basement.
Mm-hmm.
So we never had to
Didn't have
empty
to
the
clear
water.
it out. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
So, did she pretty much have a full day's worth of work to do at home every day, more or less? When you talked about cleaning and washing and cooking and obviously taking care of the kids.
Yeah. When it was just the two of us, there wasn't that much, you know, to do. And my job on Saturday was to do all the dusting in the house, which that took 3/4 of the day to do that,
Mm-hmm.
upstairs and downstairs. Now, when the boys were younger and I was an infant, I'm sure she was a lot busier. And I think she lost, well, I know she lost babies from pneumonia, and I think she lost 2 of them, both girls.
Mm.
So she had a total of 5 children.
Were those all before you?
Yeah.
Do you know if they were between you and one of your, like, were they between you and a brother? Or?
I think they were both before me. And of course, infant pneumonia was very common then. And I guess, I don't know what the numbers were, but a lot of babies died of pneumonia.
Mm-hmm. Do you have many memories of the period where both your brothers were in the house? Because what's the age difference from you to your middle brother and you to your eldest brother?
Yeah. I think there's like 8 years between my brother Ken, who was the second oldest, and Al he was a couple of years older than that, so say maybe 8 and 10 years difference.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then of course when the war came and they both got drafted, then they were gone, you know.
Right.
And my brother Al, I think he took more after my dad as far as studies and whatnot. My dad was a whiz at math. I don't know how, but Ken would Al was the one that was more like my dad, and Ken was more like, he sat down to play a piano, and he could play it just by ear. Whatever he heard, he could play.
You said that was Ken?
Yeah.
Did he have any formal training? Did he ever have a piano teacher or anything? No?
No, he could play by ear.
And was that something that he got from your mom, or did you not know where that came from?
Nobody else that I know of could play the piano.
Yeah. Was anybody else in the family musical? No? I want to ask about your brothers in a second, but before I do, what did you know, if anything, about your grandparents?
Not a thing.
Not a thing. Did you know their names?
No. Only thing I know is what my brother Al mentioned about my father's dad.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently he was a tough old bird in Madeira.
Okay.
I don't know if they had banana farms or they had some kind of farming.
I think it was sugarcane.
Sugarcane, yeah.
Is this the story about how did he lose an eye?
Yeah.
Tell that story.
The what?
Can you tell that story?
What?
About how your grandfather lost an eye or whatever?
Oh, yeah.
Because it was out in like a sugarcane field, right?
Yeah.
So he was a farmer, presumably, or worked on a farm.
Mm-hmm.
And if I recall, it was sugarcane.
Yeah.
And I think they would cut them, and it would leave like a stump.
Mm-hmm.
This is the story I remember, at least. And did he fall in the field one day?
Yeah, something like that. Landed on the eye.
Yeah. Is that the story you were thinking of?
Yeah.
Yeah. And did you know his name? So you didn't know any of your grandparents' names?
Well, I probably did, but I don't
You've
know.
since forgotten.
Yeah, don't remember.
And I would assume that, would it be safe to say that it wasn't much of a topic of discussion? Because otherwise, if I feel like if it had come up a lot, you probably would have remembered it better. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they had photos of them, but it was
I think there might be one in here.
typical sepia photos.
Let's see. Is that a grandparent? Do you know who that is? You want to take it over there? This person.
I remember the picture, but I don't remember who he is.
But it's obviously not your dad, and it's not one of your brothers, so presumably somebody older.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. I want to ask about your brothers now. So we've already established you had 2 brothers, and those were your only siblings that you knew of. Obviously, it does sound like you had some sisters that didn't make it out of infancy. And Al was the oldest, and he is about at least 10 years older than you, sounds like.
Mm-hmm.
Did you call Kenneth Kenny or Ken? Or did he just go by Kenneth?
I think I used to call him Kenny.
Okay. Kenny was 8 years older than you, which is still a pretty big difference.
Yeah.
So what are your memories like of your brothers when you were kids? Do you have Because obviously by the time you were, probably 6 or 7, Al was basically a grown man at that point, and Kenny probably wasn't far behind him. Did you have much time in your life where the three of you were in the house together? And do you have many memories of that? Like, were there Christmases, or would you guys play together much, or were there friends around the house or anything like that?
Well, when they were old enough to drive, which would be 18, I remember that they used to have, that they had a whole group of friends, their age. And the two brothers, it was two separate groups, And they would have house parties. And that was the extent of their entertainment, I guess.
Okay.
As far as I know, they didn't go out drinking. They just went to somebody's house and drank.
Was these were house parties that parents didn't know about, or?
I think generally speaking, the parents knew about it. And I think most of the parents were pretty good. I don't remember what mine did, but they would either go up to their bedroom, or some of them had a finished room in the basement, or and they just stay out of the way.
Right.
And as long as nobody went crazy, they just let them be. And as far as drunk driving, and nobody ever mentioned it,
Right. Do you remember what any of those parties were like? Were you ever around for any of them?
Well, the one that sticks out in my mind was, like I said, my bedroom was the middle bedroom upstairs, and there was a hallway that ran from the back bedroom all the way to the front bedroom, and on one side of above the stairs was a closet, and I had been asleep. I don't know how long, but I hear all this yelling and screaming, and some drunk went into the closet and took a whiz. He thought he was in the bathroom.
Yeah, some things don't change. That happens. That happens nowadays too.
Yeah.
Were your brothers both? Sounds like they both like to have a good time. Were they both?
Yeah.
Were they kind of like typical, guys? Would you say, like they were manly men type?
Mm-hmm.
Were they? What was their relationship like with you? At least at the point where you can remember, like maybe when you were, 8, 9, 10 years old. Were they almost more like uncles to you than brothers in a sense? Like, was your relationship?
Well, they were like, because most of my friends had older brothers, but it was different because the time that you saw them was, each day wasn't that long, and especially the weekends, they were always, out partying someplace. So, as far as observing them or them observing me, I don't think there was too much. I know at one point, my brother Ken, he had the job of Saturday dusting. So he asked me if I would like to do it. I had never done it before. And so I said, yeah, sure, And then, of course, being young and stupid, he comes home and he said, well, how did dusting go? I said, oh my God, I forgot all about it. He about went nuts, because then he had to do it.
Right.
So, and then get ready for the party.
Was the deal that he was still or was he just passing that responsibility on to you? Was there anything in it for you? Like, did he get
Oh yeah, it was. I
did
don't
he
know,
get paid or something?
$5 or whatever it was,
Uh-huh.
you know.
So did he get paid to do it, and then he was just going to pass some of the money
I
on
don't
to
know.
you?
Yeah,
He kept you in the dark on the details.
yeah.
Yeah. Did you and your brothers all go to the same schools?
No, both my brothers went to Catholic school, elementary school, and then my older brother Al, he went to it was a special school for boys only. It was called Brooklyn Technical. I don't know if they called it Technical College, but it was a high school.
Mm-hmm.
And you had to pass a test to get in. So that's where Al went. And Ken went to the same high school that Grandma Sue went to, John Adams High School.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went to public school all the way through, and starting with kindergarten, and then graduating from high school. And that was totally different than from what the two of them went to, you know, different schools.
Do you remember the name of the Catholic school that Al went to?
Yeah, St. Benedict Joseph.
And then where, do you know where, so was that in elementary school?
Yeah.
And did Ken go to the same elementary school or a different one?
I think they both went to the same one, yeah.
And then you went to public school. What was the name of your elementary school?
Well, the first one was, they didn't have names, they had numbers.
Mm-hmm.
PS 55
PS 55.
and then PS 57. They split the 8 grades up between two schools. And one had the kindergarten, that was 55, and a good friend on my street, Don Hanson, he was born the same month as me, so we both started kindergarten together, and we went, well, both of our moms took us the first day, and this shows you how different things were then, even though there was a lot of weirdos, but most of the weirdos were locked up then.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, the two moms walked the two young snots down to kindergarten, which was like 5 blocks away. And every block was a city street with traffic on it, you know. So they explained to us, you know, how you have to watch out for cars, blah, blah. After that, we were on our own.
You got one day's walk, and then you're on your own. And this was to PS 55?
Yeah. So then one day, and I'm not sure, we were still in kindergarten, we were walking home, and I guess I had to crap so bad that I crapped in the street. So that afternoon, Don and his mom were going to visit friends, and they took the same route that we took. And he said, "Look, Mama, that's what Joe do."
Did you? So you pulled your trousers down and you just went right where you were. Did anybody say anything to you? Were people around?
Not that I know of. Nobody said pick it up.
That's funny. Okay, so it was PS 55 for a couple of grades, like up until maybe 6th grade or something like that?
Yeah, it might have been 6th. The last 2 or 3 grades were at PS 57. And
Before high school.
yeah,
Okay. And then what high school did you go to?
Richmond Hill High School.
And did you and your brothers, were any of you athletes when you were kids? Did you play sports? Was that common?
No, the street I grew up on, there must have been almost 10 of us that were within a year of each other, all boys. So we played every sport possible in the street,
Mm-hmm.
even roller hockey.
Mm-hmm.
And that was I tried out for the baseball team, but didn't make it. And our high school didn't have a football team.
Mm-hmm.
So basketball and swimming were the big sports.
How did you guys play roller hockey? Like, where did the skates come from?
Well, we bought regular skates, and I was the goalie, so I didn't have a whole lot of skating to do. I made pads out of carpeting, and I think I had a catcher's mask for a face mask. And but the actual roller skates, some of the guys that were real, like if they wanted to get going quick, they were running, not skating.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so the from front to back wheels was only about that much. They'd shorten the thing so they could get up on their toes
Mm-hmm.
and run. You know.
Mm-hmm.
And we used to play that in the street.
Mm-hmm.
And we never thought anything of it, but the street we lived on was a main street that went north and under the railroad. It was only like every so many miles where you could pass the railroad, you know. So our street had a lot of traffic for people that were driving north, you know. But no one ever. Well, one kid got hit by a car, but but not real bad. The driver had slowed down. Most of them slowed down because we built a hockey cage, a net. So that was always there. We never moved that, you know,
Mm-hmm.
except when we weren't playing. So that was this one. I don't know whose fault it was, but this one kid actually got hit by the car, but the car was just about stopped.
Mm-hmm.
So the driver gets out of the car in a panic, you know. He goes to the back of the car and, "Where's the kid? Where's the kid?" The kid had gotten up and walked to the front.
So you played roller hockey in the neighborhood. Did you play other games?
Yeah, basketball, stoop ball.
What's stoop ball?
Stoop ball was where most of the houses had brick stoops going up to the first floor was above the street level.
Mm-hmm.
So stoop ball, I forget exactly. Well, it varied depending on the stoop. But what you did was you had we called them Spaldings. They were like naked tennis balls.
Mm-hmm.
And you would throw that against the stoop. And the perfect hit would be right at the 90 degree, and then the ball would really go.
Mm-hmm.
And then you would run the bases, you know, which would be from one side of the street to the other. And so that was fun. And then we also played box ball, which was, I think it was more like handball, but against the ground. So we had squares marked off, and so you would hit the ball down, and the other guy had to match it, and so forth. So we were out in the street all the time, unless it was raining.
Did you guys, I imagine at that time you had teams in the New York area, like pro or semi-pro. Like, were the Rangers playing then? And obviously I think the Yankees were playing then. So
the old Madison Square Garden.
Was that a big part of being a kid back then in terms of being out and playing hockey and being out and playing baseball or whatever? Were you guys looking up to the professionals?
Well, no, we never thought we'd be that good.
Right. But did you, was it like it is today? Obviously, I know it was different because you didn't have TV, I don't think, or it wasn't very widespread. And I don't know if games were on the radio back then.
Yeah, they were.
They were. So did you guys look up to the Rangers and look up to the Yankees?
Yeah.
And would you say you guys were all like fans of those teams?
Yeah.
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 Cool.
Yeah.
What was the name of your street?
130th Street.
130th Street. Okay. In terms of other forms of entertainment, you've mentioned that you had radios in your house. Did you guys go to like the movie theater as kids?
Yeah.
Do you have any particular memory of going to see a movie, or do you remember what the first movie you saw was, or what they were like back then?
On Saturday mornings, they used to have, it was like kids' morning, and they would usually have some continuing, like, cowboy thing. Every week was a different.
And the story would continue.
Yeah. So we would go to that, and I forget the exact numbers, but it was like you could go to the movie, have a candy bar, all for $0.25.
Pretty good. Did your family go to church regularly?
Yeah.
Did you go to church every Sunday? What church did you go to?
It was called St. Teresa of Avila.
Okay.
And it was about a 3 or 4 long block walk. And we always walk. We had no car. If it rained, we walked with an umbrella.
Did you dress, obviously, pretty nicely to go to church, or as nice as you could?
I don't know if we had to wear ties, or I know we had a goofball priest. He was as nutty as the day is long. He was an old guy. And his name was Father Sullivan. And he would actually tell people, like a lot of men would stand in the back of the church because they, for one reason or another, they couldn't sit, he would always yell at them, "There are plenty of seats in this church. Get into a seat and, sit down." So this one kid's father, he was one of the ones standing. And at that particular time, he had severe hemorrhoids and couldn't sit. So he finally got tired of listening to this old coot yell and scream. So he just turned around and left.
I thought you were going to say he turned around and showed him his hemorrhoids. So were there, going back to the, playing games and sports as a kid, were there organized sports? Were there, could that be found if you were looking for it? Like, was there Little League baseball, or was there, more formal leagues that you could play in if you wanted to? Or was that hard to come by?
I think that was hard to to come by. And what we did, you know, most stuff was word of mouth, you know. Well, I guess our street had the reputation of, you know, kids are always playing in the street, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So one day we decided, well, we were going to start a hockey team. So we all chipped in, got uniform shirts with numbers on them. I forget the name of the team, but so we picked up a couple of teams then to play, and there were several city parks near us that they had huge paved areas that you could use for a hockey court. So we played, you know, not a whole lot of games, and there was no schedule. You know, you'd play one Saturday or something, and you'd say, "Well, can you make it next week?" Or,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, we'll be here. You know.
So it was totally kid organized.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
there were, I imagine, did anybody play the role of like official or anything?
If there happened to be somebody around, yeah.
Okay.
Most of the time we just officiated ourselves.
Self-officiated.
Yeah.
Did parents ever come to watch, or
No,
it
no.
was totally the kids?
No, because the park that we used to go to, this is what I always have to laugh at people who love steam locomotives.
Mm.
They don't know their ass from a hole in the ground. Steam locomotives was the filthiest thing that man ever made.
Uh-huh.
And this park, because nobody else could live there, was built across from the locomotive repair yard,
Okay.
which was fine when the wind was from the south, but when the wind was from the north, you had to leave the park. I mean, it was just this black soot.
Mm-hmm.
And all the houses within a couple of blocks, paint was all peeling off the houses. And so it was, people say, oh, the nostalgia of the steam engine. Did you ever ride on one in the summer with all the windows open and the friggin' soot you could catch? You know, it was big chunks of soft coal.
So the parents didn't want to be around if you guys
No,
were going to the park.
No,
I understand.
they didn't even, well, they forbid us from even going there. And then they relaxed it to, as long as the wind is from the south, you know,
Mm-hmm.
as soon as it
Yeah,
shifts.
don't come home covered in soot.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Did your family have family dinner? Was that like a
Mm-hmm.
household tradition, and did that happen every day?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think my dad used to get home, I think around 6. And as soon as he got home, the dinner was ready.
Do you have many memories of all 5 of you being at the dinner table when you were
No,
young?
not really. I vaguely remember my brother Al being home on leave, and of course his wife was living with us. So it was the two of them, but aside from that, I don't remember.
So I'm going to, actually, one more question kind of while we're in the neighborhood era. Okay, and then we'll take a break. You mentioned Don Hanson, so he was a neighborhood friend of yours.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have any other noteworthy neighborhood friends, or
Oh,
even
yeah.
just childhood friends from school? Who were your best friends that you can remember?
Well, there was a bunch of them. There was Joe Olith, Don Hanson, Gene Quinn, who else? And there was several others that I lost touch with after I started working. But the guys that I kept in touch with up until last year, there was just 2 of us left. It was Joe Olith and myself. and his wife is still alive. He had emphysema.
Mm-hmm.
His dad was a smoker, and his dad died of emphysema, and I guess his mom had died first. So he took his dad in, and he and his wife took care of, his dad. So he stopped smoking, but he was in his 40s then. And so he hung on for quite a while, because I think he was the same age as me, so he was probably either close to 90 or, somebody's around 90 when he died last year.
Mm-hmm.
And Don Hanson, that was the guy I pooped with
Uh-huh. He ratted you out, yeah.
coming home from. So we were the same age. So when the Korean War draft started, I figured there's no way in hell I'm going in the Army. I'm joining the Navy. So I joined the Navy, and of course everybody and his brother was joined the Navy. So they had a 2-month backlog before you would be called. And another friend of mine, Jerry Jaggy, we went down to enlist together. And like 3 or 4 weeks later, he gets called up. So I went down and I said, what's the deal there? They said, we're not taking people who are claiming dependents. I was claiming my mother.
Mm-hmm.
I said, if you want to give up your dependent claim, you can get on the bus right now. So I said, the hell with that. So then when the draft came, I've always had, and today they probably know a lot more about it, but I always had what they called a heart murmur.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it could be detected, sometimes, and back then the equipment that they had was. So, sure enough, my heart murmur showed up, and the Army turned me down, so I never went.
Pretty good timing. Not a bad time for it to show up.
So then Don, he got drafted into the Marines,
Mm-hmm.
which was horrible because the Marines hated New Yorkers. They hated, what else did they hate? I don't know, but he said everything in Paris Island was, you're trying to screw up my Marine Corps,
Mm-hmm.
you damn New Yorker. And
Uh-huh.
he said it was unbelievable. He got assigned to Opelika in Miami. And to show you how they get brainwashed, he wanted to go to Korea. I said, what are you, nuts? Oh, well, I've got to get over there and get in a fight,
Uh-huh.
I said, you got to screw loose.
Well, it sounds like the Marines did their job with him.
Yeah.
All right, so I want to ask a few more questions kind of about your early childhood, and then probably touch on a little bit your experience with the war, obviously, because that was a big historical event for both our country and for the world that was going on, and be interested to hear about it from your perspective. So, sticking in your childhood, how would you describe yourself as a kid? Like, did you have particular interests? Were you pretty well behaved, would you say? Did you get up to any mischief? What kind of subjects did you like in school? Anything like that?
Well, we used to get in mischief, especially on Halloween.
Mm-hmm.
Halloween now, trick-or-treating is nothing compared to what it used to be.
Well, there's not really much tricking anymore. It's all just treats, yeah?
Yeah. Back then, we would, when we got home from school, we'd have flour sock fights. They'd put flour in a long stocking, beat the crap out of each other. And then at night, that's when the trick part came out. And one of the tricks that didn't last long, the people caught on to it, was you'd get a load of dog crap, put it in a paper bag, put it on the front stoop and light it, and then ring the bell and run like hell. Another trick was a lot of houses had fences with gates on them, and you could just lift the gate up off the fence. And what we would do is one guy would climb the utility pole as high as he could, and then we'd pass him the gate, and he would hang it from one of the hooks on the utility pole.
Yeah, that's pretty mischievous. What were you like in school? Did you have any favorite teachers or any favorite subjects? Did you like school?
Yeah, I liked school. I liked one of my favorite classes was mechanical drawing, and I enjoyed that. I enjoyed the teacher. He was a little Jewish guy, and
Do you remember his name?
I was just gonna think of it. He was real short though, and he was always happy. He was kind of, I guess you'd say he was kind of simple, but he was a good teacher as far as mechanical drawing went. But of course, half the class was a bunch of clowns, and so he had gone out, left the room for something. So this one crazy kid said, "Oh," he said, "pass me a tack," because they used thumbtacks then on a little portable drawing boards instead of tape. So he gets up on the desk and he puts the thumbtack into the ceiling. And when the teacher comes back, he said, "Oh, Mr. So-and-so," he said, "look," he said, "I was just flipping the thumbtack and it's stuck in the ceiling." He said, "Wow, the odds of that happening."
That's funny. What are your other memories from school? What was school like? How long were you there during a day?
Well, school was about probably at least a mile or two away. And high school, we used to ride our bikes. And that was fine until it would rain, So one day, it started to rain and we were almost to school. And we said, why don't we stay home today, just tell our parents that we got soaked. So we went home and we went to Joe Wallace's house, who had a professional slate pool table in his basement. Well, one of the clowns slipped with the cue stick and ripped the top of the pool table.
The felt on the pool table?
So his dad worked a day shift. His mom worked this. I don't know if she was home or what. They both worked. So there went the story about, getting rained out. So of course he caught holy hell when his dad came home.
Were you a pretty good student? Like, was your report card good? Did report cards get sent home to your parents?
No, we brought them home.
Okay.
And I was probably just barely above average student, I had no trouble at all with most of the stuff except for algebra. I could never figure algebra out.
Mm-hmm.
And we had this old Indian female teacher, math teacher. Oh, you should take trigonometry and you should. I said, I don't understand algebra. I said,
Indian from India?
Yeah.
Okay. Were you pretty well behaved as a student, would you say? Like, or did you give teachers any trouble?
No, not really. The one teacher I had, and I think she had been in the Marines during the war, and her name was Miss Picozzi. And of course, she saw my name. She figured, oh, here's an easy student,
Mm-hmm.
Well, when she found out I didn't have a clue what Spanish was all about, and she wasn't too friendly anymore.
Were you guys off you had summer vacation when you were
Yeah.
a kid from school? What did you do in the summer since you didn't have school? Was there like a particular activity, or did you just have to do more work around the house?
Well, what we used to do, of course, you had your household chores. That was every day, make your bed and, put the dirty wash down in the basement and stuff like that. But the weird thing was that's when polio was rampant. Every summer, I don't know why they even opened the pools up, but every summer, like a month later, they'd shut them all down, and kids would come down with polio. And so what we used to do was we'd most of the time hitchhike to Rockaway, which was the closest beach to us, and spend the day at the beach, getting burned and getting skin cancer, and so.
And you were pretty much on your own as kids doing that, because I imagine your dad was still going to work and your mom was taking care of the house.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, we'd hitchhike. In fact, this one guy, he had a good-looking sister who was a teenager, like 16, 17. So we'd ask her to come along, and we'd put her out at the curb,
Uh-huh.
And then when the car stopped, we'd all come
Right,
out.
you'd have a lot more success that way, I could imagine. Did you ever go anywhere as a family during the summer? Like, was that something you were able to do?
In fact, we did, and don't ask me how we did it, but we went to a 1-week vacation in Connecticut, and the name of the lake was Candlewood Lake. It had a floating island on it. And it was just my mom and dad and I. And I guess we spent a week up there. And I'm not sure what year that was, but that was the the one and only threesome vacation that I remember.
Do you remember why your brothers weren't on the vacation?
I would assume that they were probably had been drafted, but I really don't remember.
A couple more about your childhood. Did you go through the traditional sacraments route with
Mm-hmm.
going to church and stuff? Was that a big deal back then? Do you remember like your first communion, and do you
Oh,
remember
yeah.
your confirmation?
Yeah. Yeah.
What was first communion? I was a little harder to remember because you were probably young, right?
Yeah.
Was it around second grade back then still? Or do you remember?
I don't remember. I just remember kids getting sick and passing out
From being nervous? Or
from not eating.
oh, yeah, because of the fasting. Yeah. Were you older when you got confirmation?
I would guess around 12.
Okay. Do you remember that any better?
Not really.
Did you have to take a confirmation name
Yeah.
back then?
Uh-huh.
Do you remember which name you took?
John.
John. Okay. When did you have a first? Did you work as a kid? Like, did you have a summer job or?
Yeah, when I turned 12, you could work delivering the newspapers.
Okay.
So I did that for a couple of years.
Did you deliver them on a bike or?
Yep, and the bad thing was the route that I had, the houses were all set back from the sidewalk and up. So what you had to do, especially if it was raining, you had to get off the bike and walk up and put the newspaper in the doorknob, and there was no such thing as plastic bags to wrap it in. You know, you had to keep it dry, and so. But even on a good day, some of the houses were so far back that you couldn't reach them.
Mm-hmm.
So you had to get off the damn bike and walk up the hill, and so that was a tough job, and it was, of course, after school, and then it got even worse. They were originally a 6-day-a-week newspaper, then they added Sunday, so you were tied up for 7 days. Well, Saturday and Sunday in the morning.
Did they do morning and evening news?
No,
just
one. Yeah.
Okay. And it was so during the week, you said it was after school?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
How long would it take you after school to get your route complete?
Well, that varied. You went to pick up your papers, and if you were on the good side of the boss, he let you come in and fold your papers and, stick them back in your bag. We had the basket must have been that big on the bike. And on, I think Thursday was the big advertising day. Well, that damn basket would be full to the brim. And that was fine if it wasn't raining, but you had no water protection.
Mm-hmm.
So it was an interesting job. And then, of course, in the snow, half the time, if there was snow on the ground, you couldn't ride the bike. You had to push it, So that was an experience.
What other jobs did you have after the paper route? Before your career
I had my
started?
egg route,
Okay.
which just meant bringing eggs up to the deli. And I think that was about it.
After that, was it you? Well, because you would have finished high school around 18, right? Were you about
No,
18 years old?
I graduated from high school in June of '48, and in October I turned
17.
17.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then was your next job after that with Pan American, and then that was basically the beginning of your career?
Yeah. I graduated in June, started with Pan Am in July.
So you only had a couple of like odd jobs as a kid. You didn't have like a whole series of odd jobs. Okay. I'll ask you about, maybe we'll say, the beginning of World War II, just kind of as it affected your family. Do you remember where you guys were or what was happening when the country, I assume, got word about Pearl Harbor? And do you remember what it was like when, maybe even before that, when there was a war going on, but we as a country were trying to stay out of it? Was that a memorable time? Like, was something different, like something noticeably different?
Well, it was funny because that is one of the things that sticks in my mind. Is we were going, it was a Sunday, and we were walking to the movie, which we very rarely went to the movie on Sunday, but it was later in the day, and all the shops had their doors open, and they said, "Oh, the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, Where the hell is Pearl Harbor? We had no idea. But that was how we found out, walking to the movie. And then from there, it just, the stuff they did, today they think things are so bad, which they are with the stupid gas. But back then, you could only get, I think it was like one pair of shoes a year. And things were rationed, like when the A&P got butter in, all the women flocked to the store to get the butter, because once that shipment was gone, it was another few days before they got more butter.
So you as civilians were only allowed to get one pair of shoes a year during the war because of rationing, and then they were rationing all kinds of other stuff to support the war effort, basically.
Yeah, gasoline was rationed. If you were not using your car to get to work, you only got like a gallon a week. And then depending on what your drive was, then you got a different card that you stuck in the windshield, and so then you could get 6 gallons a week. But there was no joyriding around if you needed the car for work,
Right.
You just used it for work, and that was it. And
how fast did all of that happen after Pearl Harbor? Do you remember?
I don't remember, no, because I figured when Pearl Harbor, I had just turned 10. And I just remember they had scrap metal drives, which they said was a hoax, and they just wanted people to feel like they were part of the war effort,
Right.
But they had scrap metal drives, and I'm not sure how they picked all the stuff up, but anyway, there were areas like out in the middle of no place where all this stuff was piled up. They never used it. It was just bicycles and
Right.
all kinds of stuff. And then the women were asked to save cooking fat. Supposedly they use that for nitroglycerin.
Sounds about right to me, yeah, sure. Do you remember ever thinking, did it represent a big change in how day-to-day life happened? Like, to give you a comparison, like, obviously when the pandemic happened and we were literally asked to stay home, like that was a big change. Like, I had never lived through anything like that. It was a noticeable shift in how you lived your day-to-day life.
Yeah.
Was it like that? Do you remember it being like that when the war effort started compared to before? Were things very different?
As a 10-year-old, it didn't affect me that much. I
Sure.
still went to school.
Mm-hmm.
The buses were still running and stuff like that. But let's see.
Like,
One thing, there were several things that were different. What most people don't realize is the number of German submarines that used to sit off New York Harbor. And when the ships would come out to sea, they'd sink them.
Mm-hmm.
And so every car, you had to paint the top half of your headlight, you had to blacken it out to reduce the amount of light that could be
pollution.
seen by the submarines and such.
Wow.
And then every street had what they called an air raid warden. And he was a guy with a special hat and a whistle. And they would have air raid drills where you could show no light outside your house at all. So what most people did is to just shut off all the lights in the house. And he would patrol up and down the street that night. And if he saw any light, he'd blow his whistle and knock on the door and, "You got light showing, you got light showing."
Did he ever knock on your door?
Not that I know of. No, because the front of our house, we really didn't use it too much. Oh, we did use the living room, but that was the second room, and we had a radio that only had a dim light on it. So the radio was always on, and so it didn't make any difference.
Would you listen to the radio a lot? Was that like a routine thing to sort of like watching the news now? Would you sit down and listen to the radio?
Yeah, well, as kids, what we used to watch was like, I think Batman was one of the shows, and I don't know who else, but there were regular serial programs that were on every day.
Mm-hmm.
And the kids that were real fanatics and didn't want to miss a show, if it was 5 o'clock and Batman was coming on, they just run back into the house and listen to it and then come back out.
Mm-hmm.
The Green Hornet.
Did you ever listen to or did your parents ever listen to any of FDR's fireside chats? Do you remember those?
Yeah, I vaguely remember them. What I remember more was Mayor LaGuardia. He was the mayor of New York City, and he would read the Sunday comics to the kids.
That's pretty cool. What was the feeling like about the war? Like, did you feel like there was a sense of unity, or were there skeptics like there always are? Or like, did people feel a sort of patriotism towards the war effort, or did the common man maybe not feel that way?
I think a lot more than it would be today, because one of the things they did was they had, I forget what they call it, but it was a little flag, and if you had someone in the service you hung that from your front window, and I think it was, I forget the color of the star, but I think Gold Star was if your son got killed.
You lost someone, yeah.
So when you walked around and saw the number of poor young men that had been killed for, like Normandy, I think there was like 10,000 killed the first day,
Mm-hmm.
aside from, probably 20,000 wounded.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, one of the guys I carpool with, he had been drafted, and he was, I guess, had just turned 18, and he was shipped over to Europe, and he said all they did all day long was just practice landings, And he said, fortunately, his landing group was in the reserve group. So depending on how many got killed or wounded, so anyway, his group didn't get called till the next day. But then he got his one leg blown off at the Battle of the Bulge, an 18-year-old guy.
Wow.
It's hard to imagine,
Mm-hmm.
especially now with the idiots that are in charge.
Yeah. Yeah.
Back then they were still in charge, but you didn't realize how
Right.
bad they were.
People had a little bit more, held them in higher esteem,
Yeah.
maybe. Yeah. How long before we got into the war did regular people like you and your family hear about things that were going on in Europe? Like, did you know who Adolf Hitler was before the war broke out?
Yeah. No,
At what point did it start to seem like he was maybe not such a good guy?
well, my take on it, of course, it is now as an old thought. Europe is probably the stupidest group of countries the world has ever seen. They are unbelievable. They ended World War I in 1918.
Mm-hmm.
20 years later, World War II is beginning.
Yeah.
How dumb could you be?
Yeah.
Like, Hitler would never do anything.
Yeah, the League
He
of
was building airplanes and tanks.
Yeah, and that was all in violation of, I think, the Treaty of Versailles.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
the League of Nations said they would step in, and they never really did anything.
And now they're even dumber.
Mm-hmm.
They're buying fuel oil or natural gas from the communists.
Uh-huh.
Like that's going to work.
Right. So, when did the name Adolf Hitler always equate to something bad to you, or at some point was he just sort of,
because it was bad at the, I forget what year was the Olympics.
Mm-hmm. That might have been like 36 or something. Was that Jesse
late
Owens?
30s. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he was a bad name then.
Mm-hmm.
And he hated, what was it? Was it Joe Louis? Or?
I think it was Jesse Owens, right?
Yeah,
Jesse Owens was the track star.
Yeah.
And Hitler had obviously been railing about the superiority of the Aryan race. And, so in that time, I know even in America there were communists. There was ideologically it was a time of struggle between maybe more Western capitalist ideology and socialist or communist ideology. Was that something you were really? Did you ever encounter that in your day-to-day life? Like, were there communists or socialists or people you encountered, or were you ever privy to like more localized political strife or conflict, like unions and stuff like that?
Where I grew up, the area where I grew up was almost all Democrats. And when I say Democrats, they've been voting Democrat since their great-great-grandparents, and they would never change. They don't care.
And what did that mean back then? Because it's changed a lot,
Yeah.
I think you could say.
Well,
It used to be sort of the party of the little guy.
yeah,
usually.
yeah. It was supposed to be to take care of the unions and
Right.
so forth. But New York City was. Now I don't know if they publicized this a lot, but they said New York City was. The politicians were run by Tammany Hall, which was some group of, I don't know if it was millionaire Democrats or whatever, but Tammany Hall was, you could never change things because they were in control. Much like it is now, with all the jackasses that are in control.
Did you, do you remember voting when
Yeah.
you were, and how, were you 18 before you could vote? Is
Yeah.
that how it worked? And did your parents vote?
Yeah.
Because your mom would have been able to vote by
Yeah.
then, right? Who did you all generally vote a certain way then? And did you have a...
I don't know what they voted. I don't ever remember them, like they didn't preach to me on how to vote,
Sure, they weren't overtly
They,
political
they,
people.
they taught me about the procedure, what you
Right.
had to do, pull a curtain and, but they never told me how to vote. So at that time I had the theory of if he's in office, he should be out.
So you would vote against the incumbent usually.
Yeah.
I kind of like that. Back to the war. When your brothers got drafted, or did they both get drafted, or did they volunteer?
Alan got drafted, and I think Ken, because he worked for the airline, who was now working for the Navy, Ken got an exemption, and this was before he was married and so forth. And he finally got to the point where he couldn't travel, like get on a bus. People would mock him, why aren't you in the army, what's wrong with you, So he finally asked to be inducted into the Navy, and so they activated him, and he was part of a PT boat squadron, which was right on Long Island. I think it was Long Beach, Long Island. That's where the squadron was based, so he never saw any combat. And my brother that went to Africa, he never saw any combat either. So they were both fortunate.
How long was Al gone? Al was the one who went to North Africa, right?
I don't know. She came to live with us when he went overseas, which was to North Africa. And I'm not sure how long that was, but she was still living with us when my father died, which was in '44. So I'm not sure what happened with the Fort Belvoir, if they canceled the classes or whatever.
But he was back in America when the war ended, so then he just got to come home, basically.
Yeah, and then she had, I think she had moved up there with him.
Is it still overheating?
Yeah, no, it's good for now. More minutes probably.
What do you remember about the end of the war, like VE Day and VJ Day? Were there really big celebrations in the streets, or
Well, not
did that
where I
happen where
live,
you lived?
know.
No?
but you could, of course, that was before TV, and so you could hear it on the radio, the Times Square and so forth and so on. And then if you went to the movie, they had what they call newsreels, and they would always show, so like if the war ended on Tuesday and you went to the movie on Wednesday, you'd probably see the movies of, the Times Square celebrating and whatnot. But as far as home, we got the newspaper every day, but that didn't show you that much.
Mm-hmm.
And of course the radio was the big communication.
Mm-hmm.
And something you might not be aware of, but one of my friends, his brother served in the Navy in the Pacific. And so when he got out, the government started what they call a 5220 club. And that was $20 a week for 52 weeks for a year. That was your reward for serving.
Mm-hmm.
And he bought the first TV on the street.
Cool.
And we used to go in and watch the test patterns were on in the daytime.
Do you know about what year that was?
No, I don't. But
Was it still in the 40s, obviously, probably?
Yeah,
like 46 or 47?
Maybe? Yeah. Something like that.
I have a few random questions for you. The World's Fair was in New York City in 1939.
Yeah.
Was that, would your family have known about that? Like, was
Oh,
that
yeah.
a big deal?
We went to it.
You went to the World's Fair?
Yeah.
Was that a memorable experience
Oh,
for
yeah.
you?
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you remember about that?
Well, the Trilon and Perisphere were the symbols of the World's Fair. It was a globe and a sphere like the Washington Monument,
Uh-huh.
And I think they called it the Trilon and Perisphere, which doesn't make sense to me. But anyway, that was the theme. And I think they had the City of Tomorrow
Mm-hmm.
was inside the dome.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
wasn't there like a glass display? And I wanted to say it was like the motor car companies.
Oh, yeah.
Because they wanted to show you like
Yeah.
super highways and stuff
Right,
like that,
yeah.
and that's
Mhm.
how cities were going to be in the future.
Yeah.
What else? Wouldn't there have been like a big Ferris wheel or something? Or was there anything like that?
Yeah, they had the parachute jump, which I think it's still in Coney Island. I think they moved it from Coney Island to the World's Fair. And that was the only ride I would never go on.
Mm-hmm.
And just because I was afraid of it. Because what it was you sat in these chairs, I think it was either 2 or 3 people to a chair, and there was an actual parachute above you. And it got hauled up to the top, and then it got released, and it actually fell,
Mm-hmm.
except it was a controlled fall,
Mm-hmm.
And when that thing came to the bottom, I mean, it was like bouncing, 50 feet up in the air. And the main reason I wouldn't go on it was every now and then one of the parachutes got stuck at the top. And they'd have to send guys up, actually climb the tower, climb out to where the faulty parachute was and release it. I figured, it's bad enough going up and getting dropped, but if you're up there for an
You get
hour or
stuck.
so, you know what?
Yeah. How would you and your family have gotten to the World's Fair? Like, how did you go? Because you didn't have a car at the time, right?
Yeah. I think it must have been one of my brothers, because I know Now there was a way of getting there by bus and train. But then after, I forget what year it is, but it was after World War II, there was another World's Fair in New York. And we had moved to Florida. So it was after '63. And I think we had driven to New York for vacation. And we went to that World's Fair. And I forget what the theme for that one was. But when we got back to school in Florida, John's teacher asked him, what did you do for the summer? He said, we went to the New York World's Fair. She says, what was your most enjoyable part of the World's Fair? He said, the trash cans. Because the trash cans were like the vents on a boat,
Uh-huh.
and instead of dropping it in, it was curved, L-shaped. And he just thought that was the coolest thing, to be able to throw your trash in sideways,
Yeah, well, if you'd never seen one before, I guess it would be pretty cool.
Yeah.
My last couple random questions. Were World War I veterans very common back then? Because I know our involvement in World War I wasn't as extensive, I don't think, as our involvement in World War II, but we did get involved at some point, I think.
Well, it was very common on my street, because Gene Quinn's father, he was in World War II, and he got gassed.
World War II or World War I?
World War I.
Mm-hmm.
And he got gassed,
Mm-hmm.
and his complexion was all red. He could still work, he could function, but he was a sight,
Yeah.
So every day you saw him coming home from work, you remember he got gassed in Europe.
Yeah.
So
you knew World War I veterans.
yeah.
You were probably too young. You were probably sort of like us, where there may have been Civil War veterans, but they would have been very old.
Yeah.
Do you ever remember meeting one by chance, or hearing about one? And then, short of having met one, do you remember what? Because it was less than 100 years since the Civil War when you were born. Do you remember what that, or how that event was viewed in your youth, and how it was talked about, or how you learned about it in school, or anything like that? Because that was probably the last real significant conflict.
As far as I remember, no one in New York ever talked about the Civil War.
Mm-hmm.
Never even mentioned it.
Mm-hmm.
And when we moved to Florida, there was one old guy in the department, the real old Southerner,
Mm-hmm.
real nice guy, And he said, where are you from? I said, Richmond Hill. You're not from Richmond Hill. Where are you from? I said, Richmond Hill, Long Island, New York City. New York City? There's no Richmond Hill. He went on and on. So he knew exactly. He hated the Northerners,
Mm-hmm.
and, the South got screwed, which they probably did.
Yeah, Richmond probably meant something else to him, yeah. Well, I've checked off all my random questions, and I know we probably need to take a break, so are you good to call it a day probably here?
Yeah.
Any other?
Whatever you guys want to do.
Well, we can definitely pause now, and then I don't know if maybe we could pick up later today, just if it works out with our schedules. And if not, we'll definitely pick it up another time. We'll be able to set it up a lot faster. Any other big standout memories or events from, let's say, when you were born until around like when you graduated high school that we didn't talk about? Like, was there any big event in your life that happened, like, that really sticks in your brain? Like, I think about my childhood, and I think about like when we moved, or when I like got injured, like you have a serious injury or something, or anything that sticks out in your brain that we didn't cover.
Not really. And I know for my mother, I figure she moved into that house in the late 1800s and didn't move out till 1955, I guess.
That same house in Richmond Hill?
Huh?
That one house in Richmond Hill?
Yeah. So that was a big, and especially moving in with her daughter-in-law.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a big move for her. For me, it was no big deal because Grandma Sue was expecting Karen. We moved in March, and Karen was born in April. And I'll show you some of the crazy things people used to believe in. Grandma Sue was painting the nursery. And I don't know if her mother came out, but my mother was there. Or between the two of them. You shouldn't be painting, the fumes are going to hurt the baby, and blah, blah, blah.
All right. Let's call it a day for now.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Papa. That was really fun. I appreciated that.
No problem.